Well, hello, my fine friends. Welcome back to Destination Discourse. I'm your host, Stuart Butler, and I am thrilled to say that for once we have a guest on our show that's finally qualified to co-host, and that is the newly minted CDME, Adam Stoker. How are you,
You know
sir?
what, Stuart? It's nice to finally be worthy of your presence.
Yeah, I mean, up until now, you've just been sort of guessing because you didn't have your CDME.
Yeah.
I say that fully aware of the fact that I don't have my CDME either, but at least now you
But
have a credential.
you were born qualified, right? Like I had to work for it.
Well,
You've got a British accent. You don't need a CDME.
that's true. They do say that the British accent makes people think you're smarter than you are. So I
Yeah.
guess that's true.
But I
That's
clocked
my
that with you
credential.
early.
Yeah, people say that you should assume that people with English accents are 15 IQ points lower than they sound, and then people with Southern accents are 15 IQ points higher than they sound. You know. So I
So
married a
yours
Southern
cancel
girl.
out then?
She's very
Yeah.
smart. Oh man, how was the eye? Was it good? You just got
You know
back.
what? It was really good. For one, Portland is pretty cool. I
Yeah.
I have heard a lot of different things about Portland. Hadn't been there before and really enjoyed my time. I also got to play an amazing golf course while I was out in
Of
that
course you did.
area.
Of course you did.
Yeah, and played pretty good. So that of course makes the trip great. But the cool thing was when I went to DI, I was able to catch up with so many Desties and industry professionals that I hadn't had an opportunity to catch up with. I talked to our friend that was Dan Gibson. I talked to Dan Gibson there for a few minutes, and Dan
Yeah.
said people keep coming up to him and saying, "Hey, I heard you on Destination Discourse," which was kind of fun. And
We do have at
um,
least 80 listeners, so that doesn't doesn't surprise me. It's good.
Yeah, no, there's some Desties there, and it was really fun to just catch up with everybody. Caught up with fellow Destie Emily Zertucci, and got to
Yeah.
learn a little bit more about what she's up to, and
Yeah, we
several
need to have her
other.
back on the show now. She's not Corpus Christi anymore and see what she's up to for sure.
Yeah,
She still has some of the most listened to episodes. I think she's been overtaken for the number one spot again, but she's right up there in the top five
who
for
took
sure.
over?
I'm pretty sure one of Jeanette's episodes is top right now.
Oh
So yeah,
man,
it sort of fluctuates. I tell you, the ladies bring it, man. I think at least six of the top 10 episodes are some of our female Desties. So we need to continue to get some amazing leaders on this podcast for sure.
I
How about
agree.
that?
I
All
totally
right,
agree.
so let's jump into it. I guess we got to do the obligatory, have we?
The what?
Obligatory.
Is
Is that
that
better?
is
Yeah,
that the British accent
I
and the
guess so.
Southern accent
That made me
combining?
sound dumber than I am. Yeah, I guess so. Obligatory. It's Stu's news, I guess.
Oh yeah, the obligatory jingle.
It is. It ticks all the boxes, right?
That might be one that gets etched into to Destiny's
It's
Discourse
it's
history
part of the
right
lore of
there.
the show now.
Yeah,
Tick all the
it tickles
boxes.
the boxes.
I like to tick all the boxes. Um, so today's Stu's news. I mentioned this briefly in another update recently when we were talking about AI, and ChatGPT just did a massive update just as recently as this week. So July, I think 22nd is when they actually fixed some things they'd broken when they did the update. I was actually frustrated for the first couple of days. So basically, this update has made it a lot more like Claude Cowork, right? And they actually call it ChatGPT Work. And it's got a lot of plugins now natively that you can just plug in. So like Outlook, Gmail, Asana, like everything you can think of that you would want. It's got Adobe, all those sort of plugins that Claude had. It's also got a thing called Sites now, where you can actually build websites directly within a conversation. So obviously got Codex, which has been out for a while, which is kind of like Claude Code. But it's also one of the plugins is a Chrome browser extension. So now it can do what Claude's been doing for a while, which is actually go navigate your desktop. So it doesn't have skills, doesn't have the replacement for skills yet, but my understanding is that is rolling out to some folks so that by the time we record the next episode, I would imagine here. But this brings a little more parity between the two tools. And so I got to tell you, we at Visit Model Beach, and I talked recently that we're sort of in the process of reevaluating our AI, and we're going to hire a full-time employee to just focus on AI for us. We were actually leaning towards moving everyone to Claude over the next few months so that they had that capability. But now we're sort of saying, well, wait a second, if folks are already familiar with ChatGPT and it's going to have the same functionality, does it make more sense to stay with ChatGPT? So we're sort of in a little bit of limbo. But I think what we're seeing, there was also this week a new update from Moonshot came out, which is a Chinese open source AI company. They brought out their K3 um, model, and it sort of jumped to the top of the capabilities list for a lot of functions within AI. And so I think what folks are saying is we're going to see an acceleration of updates, and the parity is going to be even greater. Like it's going to be really hard to differentiate between the capabilities. So it's going to be use cases and specific finite purpose of AI that's going to differentiate and force you into different things. And maybe we're going to be in a world where we do have some kind of decision-making thing that sits atop our different AI models that determines which one we use. I know Vimmel's actually talked about that on the show before, and to me, or maybe not on the show, maybe that was in a AI conversation we had with Jeanette, but I don't know. It's sort of it's rocked my world a little bit because I thought, hey, we're all in on Claude. I've personally been using Claude a lot, but for the last 4 or 5 days, I've been back using ChatGPT a lot, and it's able to do most of what I've been able to do in Claude. So it's I don't know if you've had a chance to play with this yet, but
I haven't
interesting
touched,
times.
yeah, I haven't touched ChatGPT, but you know, at least not in a long time. But what's interesting about what you're saying, you said there may be some entity at the top that helps orchestrate which tools we're using. I was listening to the All In podcast this past weekend, and they spent a pretty significant segment of the show on the fact that the CFO's role, a major portion of CFO's roles moving forward, is going to become identifying which tools should be used for which projects and maximizing AI value compared to token cost. And I do think that's
Hmm.
where this is going because if you think about the way everybody's using AI right now, we're still in the exploratory phase where people haven't recognized which tools are right for which projects, and
Hmm.
especially when it comes to which tools use the right amount of tokens for which projects, right? So we had Fable on Claude for a couple of weeks, Fable 5, and
Hmm.
it was super fun. I was able to solve lots of problems. Well, now they've restricted use of Fable 5 behind a paywall. And it's like, well, the stuff I was using it for, I can get done just fine with Opus or Sonnet
Yeah.
or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so somebody now is going to have to develop the skill set within an organization of identifying which technology is right for which projects and helping minimize the expense while maximizing the output of AI or the results from AI. And anyway, it's kind of a continuation of what you're saying. I haven't used ChatGPT in a long time, so I can't speak to their updates. But I do have a question for you when it comes to ChatGPT and the things that they're doing. And that question is, you said that they're getting close to what Claude is able to do, right? And you feel like you can do
Hmm.
almost as much as what Claude can do with ChatGPT. Is this a move out of opportunity or desperation from ChatGPT, do you think?
Yeah, I don't think they're desperate by any means. They're making a ton of money and growing, and so I think it is a reaction to they made a strategic error early on, right? Where they which may pay off in the long term, but in the short term, maybe wasn't best for short-term profitability. But they went all after the consumer um, market in realize, hey, there's sort of a ceiling on what people will pay for average consumers, but when it comes to enterprise level in work, there's actually not really a ceiling, because if I can hire an employee and then through technology make them 3, 4x, or even 10x as effective, then I mean, theoretically, I could be spending as much or more on the technology to support an individual employee. So
Yeah.
the potential is a lot bigger. So I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, but I think we're also getting to the point where these open source products, we saw some people speculating that the value of these companies dropped dramatically after K3 came out from Moonshot
Yeah.
because If an open source product that someone can install on their own software is just as capable, then why would people be, you know, behind in these walled gardens and paying more money? And so,
I think for
and
the Desties listening, you need to define open source versus the Claude and Chat
yeah, so
GPTs.
Claude and ChatGPT, most of these are like more like software as a service, where you sign up for an account, you're licensing the product, you don't actually own the product. Now you can sort of create your own instances of it. So if you have private data and things like that, it can be, but you still, and if you're not paying the vendor, you basically don't have access to it, right? Whereas open source is literally the code that runs the product. You get a version of that and you can install it on your own hardware. There's no licensing fees, there's no ongoing third party relationship. You are in complete control of it. And then you can do what you want. You can build upon it, you can leave it as is, or you can continue to download updates. So
So the
the
value of those
main
companies dropped because some of this technology can now be accessed for free through open source
essentially
products.
free. There's a different kind of cost, right? You've got to have you got to have the hardware, you've got to have the expertise and things like that, right? But um, it's kind of like back in the day. You remember it was like Windows and Linux were the two. Windows was like the more your licensing, and Linux was the more if you were a little more technical, you could install it yourself, right? So
Yeah.
it's sort of similar to that. But the other thing that sort of came out this week in the same conversations, which was interesting, is that they're projecting out. Okay, they're looking at the frequency of the pioneer models and how quickly they're updating, and it went from like 12 months to 6 months to 4 months to monthly. They're projecting by January of 2027, these frontier models are going to be updating daily if it follows the same exponential trajectory. So it's going to be almost impossible to keep track of what the updates are. Um, and at the same time, there's also this group of just hobbyists, I guess, that are taking I think it's ChatGPT 2.0. So the one that came out like 3 years ago, that was the like that watershed moment when everyone was like, "Oh, generative AI is a thing." So that earliest version of ChatGPT, which was great, right? But not compared to where it is now. But what they're trying to do is make that run with the same capabilities a lot more efficiently on lower value hardware, essentially. And they've managed to get it to like, I forget the actual numbers, but it's like it's using 1% of the energy, it's using 1% of the compute
Hmm.
that it did when it came out. So what they're showing and demonstrating is through engineering, we can also make these LLMs a lot more efficient and as hardware increases. So the net of that is the cost to compute, the cost to actually deploy these AIs, which is a big part of the conversation, is going to dramatically continue to decrease for
Yeah.
a variety of angles.
What's interesting about that, and I don't want to send us too far down a rabbit hole right now, but what that means is some of these massive, massive data centers that are being
Hmm.
built, they may not be terribly necessary if the efficiency of energy usage and infrastructure continues to decrease. And there's a scenario where we have this massive fight over data centers. They build these massive data centers, and technology overtakes it within 3 to 5 years. And then you've got this giant building that might become pickleball courts or something like
Well,
that.
maybe I probably look at it a little differently because we're also on the verge of like this mass breakthrough with robotics. You've got like
Okay, yeah,
Optimus
that's
and you've
fair.
got other technology that's coming out from China that in autonomous vehicles, stuff that's going to need a lot more compute. So I think what I'm looking at is, hey, right now, if things stay where they are, we're going to face a massive bottleneck and it's going to create a massive pressure and price increase on hardware and these softwares as well. But I think what's going to happen is the technology is actually going to ramp up at the same time the new
Yeah.
innovations come out, and so I think we're still gonna need it. I still think 10 years down the road we're gonna have data centers in space and all that kind of stuff. I think we're gonna need it. I just don't think we're gonna hit the cliff that we thought we were gonna potentially hit as adoption happens. So it's cool.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, a lot happening in AI space. But the rest of this episode, I'm gonna try to make a vow to our besties. I'm not gonna talk about AI again the rest of the episode. Are you gonna commit to that as
Wow.
well?
Uh, not as the primary portion of what I'm
Okay.
talking about. I may make references to it, but most definitely not the focus of the conversation.
Okay. So what we wanted to do today is sort of take a step back and look at macro trends that are happening from a marketing and consumer behavior perspective, and what are we paying attention to, or what patterns are we seeing that we think the desties need to pay attention to, right? And we both came up. I've got three. Do you have three as well?
I got three. Yeah.
Okay, and mine sort of tied together a little bit, but not necessarily. And so um, we may have the same ones, Adam. We may not. We may have completely read the brief differently. I will tell you this, I feel like I prepared more for this episode than I've ever prepared for any episode because I've researched this for like 20 minutes beforehand. But at the same time, I feel less prepared for this episode than I've ever prepared before. So, yeah, I put in more energy, but I feel less
Interesting.
knowledgeable about it. I'm sort of on the fringe of my understanding of some of this stuff. So, um, Adam, I'm gonna let you go first if you don't
You want to
mind.
start with me?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do it. I'm excited about this because I think sometimes we get so caught up in our narrow view of destination marketing that we kind of ignore some of the things that are happening outside of destination marketing that would be really valuable for us to understand what we could do in our industry. And so
Yeah.
I thought it would be fun for us to do that in this episode. And the first trend that I was looking at that I thought was really valuable for our industry is, and this is where I couldn't commit to not mentioning AI because their AI has an ancillary connection here. I think Reddit is still one of the very most untapped resources in the world from a marketing perspective. And one of the things that, as I was researching trends that I'm seeing, is people are actually building communities within Reddit, and it's companies that are building communities within Reddit. It's not just people building communities within Reddit. And the example that I found was there's a fitness coaching app that decided to place ads in Reddit. And what they did is that it was the founder and he wrote it like a post. It looked exactly like a post and it said, "Hey, I know you hate seeing ads here, but I've started this company and I wanted to share it with everyone. Here's what it is. Here's what it does. I'm sorry for the ad, but I'd love to know what you think." Because of the way he structured that ad and because of the way he was really vulnerable, unpolished, and correct for the format. Reddit is very conversational, right? He
Hmm.
built his ad for the format. He built a community of 16,000 people on Reddit that essentially took version one of what he launched, and the feedback from that community built the remainder of the app. So these 16,000 people all got to participate in the construction of the app and the direction of the app. And they essentially crowd sourced the building of the app for what they wanted from a fitness coaching app. It's called
Hmm.
Caliber. Super, super interesting. Caliber Fitness. But I think that's one of the things. I mean, when you look at Reddit, it kind of feels like this nasty black box that people get really negative on, so you're a little afraid of it, right? This
It's a little
guy,
dark. Yeah.
yeah, and when he posted, he left comments on. Most people, when they post ads, they turn the comments off because they're terrified of all the angry, awful things that can come. I know that Myrtle Beach has had some experience with Reddit and some success, some failure with Reddit. And I just value the fact that you guys are actually willing to give it a try because I think most destinations are terrified of it. But when I look at Reddit and the value that it's receiving in the LLMs, as far as search
Yeah.
results,
Mhm.
this if you want to know what people think or feel about a topic, Reddit may be the very best resource. And I'll tell you this straight up front, I haven't done near enough to understand Reddit and recommend it correctly for my clients. And after going through this case study and seeing the power of being a part of the community instead of trying to leverage the community, which I think is the subtle difference here in the way this Caliber Fitness founder used it. I want to build communities on Reddit, and I think it's an untapped opportunity and it's something that's clearly a trend that's making a lot of sense right now.
Yeah. So for people that aren't familiar with Reddit, think about an old school forum. It's like that, but it's every forum that could ever exist does exist and already does. So there's what's called subreddits, right? Which is it's usually r slash whatever it is. So there's like an r slash pretty much every brand, whether the brand probably didn't create it, right? But there's an r slash Nintendo, there's an r slash Nike, there's an r slash Myrtle Beach that exists. There's subreddits for just about everything that exists. I would
Yeah.
guarantee most major cities have one. There's some for like states as well. There's probably some for some of the businesses in your area.
There's
So
almost every topic you could imagine has a subreddit,
right.
right?
Yeah, and there's some really cool, quirky ones too, like "Am I the asshole?" and stuff like
Yeah.
that, which are a lot of fun, right? And so there's what I would call a lot of different mini communities that exist. That what I like about what Caliber did is they followed the playbook of Marketing 101, which is they knew their audience and they knew the rules of the arena that they were in, right? And they like a lot of people have tried and failed at Reddit. I mean, we've tried and been very successful with our Matari Best campaign. We tried with a follow up to that, and when it failed miserably, we did also keep the comments on, and that was really helpful for us. But we approached it sort of being in on the joke and it's very tongue in cheek, but we still were very promotional with what we did. What he did, which is brilliant, is he started a conversation, which is what Reddit is built for, right? So he understood his audience, understood the arena, and he followed the rules of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's great.
Can I give you a couple stats just real quick from
Cool.
Reddit?
Yeah.
116 million daily active users and 19% year over year growth. That
Yeah.
that is unbelievable. 77% of Redditors visit two or more communities to validate a single purchase decision. 63% are more confident in their decisions made through Reddit community interactions than other social platforms. 58% see a brand respond directly to a customer question in a thread increases their trust. So if they see a brand active on Reddit, it increases their trust in the product.
Mhm.
And 83% of decision makers complete research through peer communities and self-directed search before talking to sales. I mean, Reddit is incredibly powerful if you follow the playbook, like you said, know your audience and meet them where they are instead of asking them to change for you.
Yeah. So this is sort of a it's related to the conversation we had in a recent episode where we were talking about, and I'm going to talk about this
Yeah.
again later because it's one of my topics, but we were talking about social media in general and not necessarily having to own everything yourself, right? In actually going and leveraging other people's audiences and things like that. And I think that's great for a couple of reasons, right? One, you get visibility, you get attention, you get awareness, right? But two, and you touched on this, the LLMs are increasingly looking for citations. They're looking for references to your product, to your destination, to your businesses. And so the more you can stimulate and incubate conversations about those things, the more signals you're going to be sending to LLMs, which increases your chance of getting reference when people are looking for stuff in your destination. So
Yeah.
it's imperative, in my opinion, whether it's Reddit or other places, is find audiences where conversations are happening or could happen about your destination and about your individual project products in either be a part of those conversations or more importantly incubate those conversations. I think that's a good one.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say on Reddit, and then I want to move on. Nissan, they asked a question on the Nissan subreddit. What features do you want in our next
Yeah,
EV?
that's
And
a
they
great.
folded in the answers, the top answers to the
Yeah,
new EV that
it's
they
great.
created.
You want to know what people think, they're not afraid to give you opinions on Reddit.
Yep.
Part of me wonders, as I'm still sort of thinking out loud, is if there's a Myrtle Beach subreddit, which there is, like us going on there and say, "Hey, we're trying to figure out our next campaign. Tell us what you think about these ads." Like it's a built-in audience focus group, you know.
Yep.
So that's we might try that. Hopefully, Diane and Melissa are listening to this, and if I forget to tell them, they'll jump on it. But um, okay, that's really cool. So you took a pretty tactical approach to this. Are all yours tactical? Because mine are more focused on trends.
Um, yeah, I guess I would say mine are like trending tactics right now that seem to be
Okay.
working.
So mine are sort of more behavioral shifts or
Hmm.
mindset shifts, I guess. But
Well, that's a
I
good,
think that
yeah,
works.
good separation.
Um, so the first one is I want to talk about the value equation has changed, right? In there's no hiding the fact that the K-shaped economy is having a devastating impact on certain segments of travel, right? And we're seeing economy hotel product is certainly not performing anywhere close to what luxury is in terms of year over year growth. And DI actually put out some data on this. I think at the beginning of 2025 that projected out this sort of bifurcation of the curve between value product, economy product, and then mid-scale and above product. And they were already seeing the data, and I got to tell you, it's gotten worse, right? Because of the pressure on the economy. And so we're seeing this across the board that people are still looking for value, but value that was once price driven is now more experience driven, right? And so Tim Peter, a friend of the show, has been on before as a Desti, has always talked about differentiation is providing value that people are willing to pay for. That's how you differentiate. And I think because of consumers value different things today, they value status, they value the ability to have novel experiences. Increasingly, especially younger folks are looking for analog experiences. They're trying to disconnect from technology and things like that. I think what people are looking for, especially in travel, is the kind of stuff that Atlas Obscura has done a really good job of celebrating for years, right? It's the off the beaten path, it's the novel, it's the stuff that I can put on my social media and gain fake internet points and status for, right? And so I think whereas destinations historically have focused on things like price, uh, they don't have to anymore. But at the same time, people are looking for this weird sort of luxury, or let's not use luxury, let's use indulgence while also saving money. And the example I'll give you, there's tons of data in this. Like McKinsey's got tons of data, like tons of folks have sort of analyzed this more empirically than we're going to talk about. But I want to point out a brand that probably needs a little love right now because they've been in the news for the wrong reasons, and that's Taco Bell. And so in 2025, uh, they came out with their Luxe value menu, which is kind of an oxymoron, right? It's
Yeah.
the luxurious, but it's also value. But what they said is you can come out and have a little indulgence, the extra stuffed burrito and the taco salad and stuff like this, but you can still get luxury at a good price point. And so I think that's what people are looking for. They're not looking to splurge on like that like $1,000 dinner, but they want to feel like they're treating themselves in a way that's sustainable. But they're also making trade-offs too. They're also saying we're seeing this in Myrtle Beach, like there's fewer people transacting like credit card swipes at restaurants, more at grocery stores. Like they'll buy a sandwich, buy bread and peanut butter and jelly and make a sandwich for the beach a couple of times. But then they'll when they do go to a restaurant, they'll go to a higher end restaurant, you know? So people are doing this thing where they're choosing where they indulge, but they're willing to sacrifice so they can indulge. So that's a trend I think we've got to pay
Yeah.
attention to.
I think that's interesting because if you look at human nature, progress is so important to I mean the happiness of humans. If you really look at it, anybody that feels
Hmm.
stagnant has a hard time feeling happy as well. But what that
Hmm.
also means is when it comes to lifestyle or wealth or whatever it is, nobody wants to go backwards. And so
Right.
you mentioned the people that will swipe their credit card more at the grocery store, but then they go out to a really nice dinner. Well, that tracks for me because what that means is they get to feel like they're not going backwards from a lifestyle perspective. Going and having sandwiches on the beach is a very organic and normal experience. You don't have to go sit at the beachside cafe and eat there.
Hmm.
You don't feel like you're going backwards by having sandwiches on the beach. But when you go out to dinner, you still want to live the lifestyle that you had even before things got tight, before, some people are getting laid off from their jobs before that happened. And so nobody wants to go backwards. And so allowing like Taco Bell, I think, which is such a funny thing to bring up right now because the
I
real
know.
question is, does the parasite even play a factor in what happened when you went to Taco Bell? I don't know. But
I went to a Taco Bell last week, and I don't very often go. But they were
did you
like
order
this.
extra lettuce?
This sounds really weird. Like I hadn't really thought about Taco Bell, but they were in this news so much that I was like, I haven't had Taco Bell in forever. And there's one right near my office. I went there, drive-through was packed. Like there were tons of people inside. I got to tell you, I don't think this. I mean, it may have had a temporary dip, but for me, it actually drove a sale because they were top of mind. There's no such thing as bad publicity, as they say, I
Yeah, I don't
guess.
know if I want to get into the psychology that leads to this awful parasite that's causing GI issues all across the country,
Yeah, it wasn't in
causing
South
Stuart to say,
Carolina.
you know
It's
what?
fine.
You know what sounds good? Taco
Yeah,
Bell.
it's fine. Wow, that's how I often zig when other people zag. What can I say? Um, the other brand I wanted to touch on too was Walmart released sort of this better goods brand, and so it's most of the products are under $5, right? So there's sort of value from a traditional sense in terms of low cost, but that's not how they're promoting it. They're promoting it as artisan products, quality ingredients. Like they're really focusing on in materials. They're really focused on the Luxe side of the value exchange, which I think is increasingly where we need to be communicating is as a destination, more on the experience. And I think increasingly we need to be, as DMOs, be thinking about how do we shape the experience that people have.
Yeah, and can you successfully in the consumer's mind bridge luxury and affordability? Because if you can, I think you can really resonate with the consumers who are craving
Apparently,
that.
you just do what Taco Bell did and just call it Lux value, and just even though that makes no sense, right?
Yeah. The best thing about that is that Taco Bell, you know that their agency and team, they millions of dollars in research only to come out with, you know what? Let's call it the Lux value meal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I will give an example in Myrtle Beach where this has played out, and this isn't a recent thing. It's been for a while. Like we've seen in the golf industry. Myrtle Beach is the golf capital of the world. We have 80 plus golf courses here, some of the best in the country. And so there's like a handful that I would say are like at the tip of the spear in terms of quality, right? Places like Caledonia and Dunes Club and stuff like that, right? The real golfers, that's the premium experience they're going to get when they come to the Myrtle Beach area. But what we've seen is packages have had a lot of success over the years, sort of blending a golf package to where if a group of folks are coming to play golf for 3 or 4 or 5 days and they want to play 3 or 4 or 5 experiences, they're not going to play all the top tier. What they're going to do is sort of do a couple of mid tier, one economy, and then
Yep.
splurge on one at the top. And so
Yep.
that's the kind of thing I think we want to look at in how we're promoting, how we're packaging our destination.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. Do something premium and we'll build the remainder of the experience so you still have a great
Yeah.
time, but the
The
whole thing
rest is
doesn't have to be
quality,
luxury.
right?
Yeah.
But it's value in an affordable sense. But something in there is a little bit indulgent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Your second one.
Back to me.
Yeah.
So this one is really interesting to me because I've seen it and seen bits and pieces of it. And as I was kind of researching this, I got excited because I'll just like to be clear with it. Nostalgia is in. Nostalgia is
Hmm.
back, and everything related to nostalgia right now is seems to be resonating with especially a millennial audience. And if you think about who millennials are, they are the bridge between the past and the future, right? Like they didn't have cell phones growing up, but they definitely were on the front end of a lot of the technology that's been developed, and so like millennials kind of thrive in that bridge between the past and the future, I would say. And I think they crave some of the life they grew up with that seems non-existent. Like we're all having to figure out how to deal with our kids having phones. When do you give them a phone? What do you give them access to on your phone, right? Like we didn't have to deal with that. We went outside and played and came back when it was dark, right? And so it's really fascinating to me how much nostalgia seems to be resonating with a millennial audience. And a couple of examples, Airbnb did the Barbie Malibu Dream House. I don't know if you've seen that
Hmm.
one out there. Spotify does the time capsule and Wrapped every
Hmm.
year, and that seems to be just incredibly popular. Um, there's Old Navy's done their campaign with Paris and Kathy Hilton. I don't know if you've seen that, but Paris Hilton,
Hmm.
who disappeared from relevance for probably 15 years, is suddenly the spokesperson for Old Navy. It's nostalgia. And I think that I'm going to draw a little bit of a line here and say I believe that that desire for nostalgia is a huge opportunity in the travel space to focus on genealogical travel. And I think that there is a hunger for connection to the past today that maybe hasn't been there for the last however many years. And I think building nostalgic experiences, things that let people feel like they are back where they used to be and feel what they used to feel is going to have incredible value to attract consumers moving forward.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I agree that nostalgia is a massive driver right now, and it's been a trend for a little while. I think there's a lot of reasons for it, right? I think you're right that sort of millennials are at that age where it makes sense. I guess you're a millennial, right? You're right at the upper end of a millennial.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm right on the upper
so
end.
so I mean, we got to stop thinking about millennials the way we used to think about them, right? I think in some people's minds they're still pretty young. I mean, they're mid 40s now, right? Some of them. So mid 30s to mid 40s. Most of them are sort of adulting at this point,
Yeah,
other than Adam. But it's I wonder too if some of this is, like we've been programmed to sort of feel like, and some of this is social media's fault, some of it's the mainstream media, but we've been programmed to think the world isn't as good as it used to be, right? Like there's this sort of overriding feeling that things are bad today, um, even when measurably you could argue the other side of that, right? That people have more health, happiness, wealth, whatever. You could argue both sides, but I think there's a genuine desire for a simpler time, for a time when things were less complicated, for a time when maybe individuals were happier, maybe a few pounds lighter.
yeah,
I think we don't even need to really understand the whys, though, at the end of the day. We just need to know that it's a leverage point. And so for a destination like Myrtle Beach, it's a massive opportunity that we've been tapping into for quite a while because
yeah,
I mean, people have been coming to Myrtle Beach for generations, and it's the place where they have created their happiest childhood memories. I mean, look at the experiences we've had and the ability we've had to work with like Rob Gronkowski and Chris Gronkowski and the Gronkowski brothers. They grew up as a family of five boys, would come to Myrtle Beach every Easter week. And when we got them back here as adults, they'd not been here since they were like 13, 14 years old, but they reverted into children in a really positive way and wanted to
yeah.
go back and do all the same thing, go to the same ice cream parlor and the same mini golf and even drive by the same hotel they used to stay at. And so I think it is a big motivator. I think if there's a destination out there that isn't tapping into this, that they're leaving massive opportunity on the table right now.
Well, and Myrtle Beach specifically is interesting because I look at the opportunity there. You talked about how we're kind of wired to believe that the world is worse than it was before, and I agree with you. But I actually think the insight for millennials is that we're starting to feel old and we're
Hmm.
starting to miss our childhood a little
Hmm.
bit, right? And so if you think about, okay, what brand partnerships could we work on? What content would make the most sense? To me, it's like, okay, what was popular in 2001? What was popular in 1997? And
Hmm.
how can we, like Paris Hilton is such a great example of
Yeah.
this that we shared
And
for
and by
Old
the way,
Navy.
she would never have done an Old Navy commercial 20 years ago,
No
right?
way. Yeah,
It,
that's the thing.
so not her brand back then.
She's affordable luxury now, right?
Right.
We're bridging
Right.
to your
Yeah.
insight. But I also think that's a big opportunity to something that would have cost a premium back then because it was totally like it was the thing. Now I
Hmm.
think you could probably build content, brand partnerships, and other campaigns
Wow.
at a discount.
What a hack, right? You could go get celebrities that are no longer relevant that were once massive. I only get Britney Spears is going to be on our next TV commercial. That's my bow to the Desties.
Allegedly. I don't want you to get sued for saying that.
It's clearly a joke. I would hope people take that as a joke. But you could go find. We talked about this at one point. The guy from the Sandlot. I don't know if it was the guy that played Smalls or the one that says you're killing me. Um, Lives in that area, and we talked at one point about having him sort of recreate that scene on the beach or something. So, we love playing in nostalgia. We think retro is super cool, and I think you can do it in um, multiple ways. I think
Yeah.
you can sort of play to your different audiences because nostalgia to you and me is probably a little different. We're five-ish years apart, right? So something like that. So
Well,
I think we probably
sorry.
grew up in a different era.
I'm just kind of excited about this idea because there's so many fun things that you could
Hmm.
do. But think about the cost to get like a Morgan Wallen to Myrtle Beach, which you guys had him come as part of the festival last year. But like, if you wanted Morgan Wallen to come do a concert there, he is as expensive as it gets today.
Hmm.
But in 15 years, you may be able to
Hmm.
get Morgan Wallen pretty cheap, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like, what musicians were famous in 2001? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't imagine a Nelly concert would be near as expensive to put on as it was back in 2001.
Yeah.
What a interesting opportunity to tap into that.
Yeah. Well, the FIFA World Cup got Madonna to come perform. Wasn't the greatest, but they did.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Yeah, I'm surprised they made that happen.
Yeah. Let's just leave that one there. But no, I love nostalgia. It's a lever we pull on a daily basis, and it's one that it's really baked into. If you look at our Model Moments campaign, which is all about making memories in Model
Yep.
Beach, and it's all rooted in nostalgia. Um, Super cool. All righty, I got to look up what my second one was because I flipped the order. All right, where are we at? So basically, audiences. So I think I think we've got to shift how we think about audiences. So I think too many brands and destinations in general focus on age as the primary divider, right? Age ranges. Like we'll treat Gen Zs different than we'll treat millennials, different than we'll treat X's, different than we'll treat boomers, etc.
Demographics.
Yeah, but it's primarily the age demographic because I think other demographics are still more relevant, right? So the shift that I've seen and the one that we've followed here is let's focus more on psychographics and behaviors in things like life stage versus age as that delimit of how we're going to target and talk to people. Because I could be a 25-year-old who's married with a kid, or I could be a 35-year-old who's unmarried, no kids, right? And so I think because the sort of social norms of shift in terms of the expectations for individuals, like that the family unit isn't the sort of the typical everyone does this by you get married at this age, you have kids by this age, you get the 9 to 5 job. Like there's so much diversity in terms of how people choose to live their lives today, from where they work to everything that I think we got to start thinking of people based on what are we trying to communicate and who is the audience. It's a constellation of factors that's going to resonate with, right? And I think the brand I want to bring up is one. I don't know if we talked about this on the show before. I know we probably talked about it outside the show, but it's the non-alcoholic brand Athletic. Are you familiar with them? Have we talked about
I am.
these guys before? Um, I'm sort of obsessed. I'm a little bit of a fanboy on this brand. I think their creative is spot on, but I really like their marketing and their messaging too because they haven't fallen into the trap, right? And other non-alcoholic brands, so they basically make primarily non-alcoholic beer that actually tastes really good. Like I really enjoy it, and I'm a beer fanatic and probably drink way too much beer, but
We've
increasingly
been
I
meaning to
found
talk to you about that.
yeah, I know. Is this the intervention? But increasingly, I'm like not craving alcohol, but I like the taste of beer and I like the sort of just the ritual of it, right? And so I've turned to Athletic as my sort of non-alcoholic beer of choice. And the mistake that a lot of brands have made with non-alcoholic or alcohol alternatives is they're really targeting younger people. They've jumped on this bandwagon of, hey, we've seen that fewer young people are drinking alcohol and so that's who we're going to target. And they're going all in on that one demographic of Gen Zs. And, I'm certainly far, far from Gen Z. What Athletic did, which was different, is they've sort of focused on a few different behavioral things. Like it's got nothing to do with age. It's got to do with, hey, we understand what you like about alcohol, but we also understand that you're trying to think about your health and you want to maybe exercise more and you don't want to go to the gym or go for a run and then come back and drink alcohol. And so they're taking age completely out of the equation in all of their messages. And for me as a consumer, that really resonated because there's a lot of non-alcoholic folks that have tried to that I've seen ads for, and it just never resonated with me because it was so age focused. Like the people in the ads were very TikToky, right? They were
Yeah.
very Gen Z that were actually communicating, and I don't see that with this particular brand. So I just think we need to think about people as people. Uh, don't worry about demographics. Think about behaviors. Think about what we can infer from what they're choosing. Like, who are they traveling with? Have they been here before? What are they really interested in? Like, and start for as DMOs to have conversations with people, turn our website into more of a conversational tool where we can start to say, how can we best serve you? And what I think the best way I can articulate it is if we think about every touch point we have with the consumer, the way we think about a visitor center or how we would interact with a visitor if we were in person with them, I would never come to a person to come here and just say, "Oh, you're in your 20s. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do." Right? We'd never do
Yeah.
that. We'd ask them
Or
questions and
you're over
qualify.
55, so you're going to
Right.
get the retiree image.
Right,
Right?
right. Exactly. And we're seeing that now. Like a 65-year-old is a spectrum of people today. A 70-year-old even. Like a 70-year-old could be perfectly fit and healthy, very athletic, looking for high octane stuff. Or a 70-year-old could be using a walker on dialysis and
Yep.
hanging on, right? So age is so much less relevant today than it used to be.
Yeah. So I could not agree more with this suggestion that you have here. And if we just look back historically through the way content used to be delivered, we used to be organized by demographics, right? Like
Hmm.
if you look at the channels at night, because people were watching certain programs based on their age. If it was after work, you're getting, how many people's dads watched Fox News during those specific times after work, and
Hmm.
that was their age range, and we were organized by age for a really long time. But if you look at content delivery today and the algorithmic way content is delivered completely by interest today. And so when we group people by demographics, we are not grouping people in the way that they are experiencing life today and experiencing content today. And that's why there's such a major disconnect when you just go based off of age or demographics or whatever it is. Interest-based content delivery, I think, is the future, and I think it's going to continue to get more and more segmented based on interest. Then, like, I think age is out the window as the primary. I don't think personas that we build from a marketing perspective
Yeah.
should even have demographics anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a little controversial, but I don't disagree with it. I'd have to think about it more, you know. Yeah. All right. What's your third one?
So my third one is just the trend. And again, this is one that I think it's been around for a minute, but we haven't talked about it very much. And that's just authenticity over polish.
Hmm.
And I think that this historically, what we used to do and this goes for tourism and non-tourism organizations, we used to spend 80% of our content budget on a hero broadcast spot of some sort or hero video. And then there would be basically derivatives of that for the remaining 20% of our content budget. And today, let's say I had $100,000 to put towards content and I'm running a brand, uh, I would put 90% of my budget into low production value, and maybe 90's high. I shouldn't say that. 60% of my budget into low production value content and go high volume, high variety. And then I would put larger budget behind um, a nice video if I've seen that something's really resonated with the audience. But people like a low budget, low production video. And if you look at the stuff that's actually getting engagement and reach on social media channels, I think the high production value stuff is in big trouble as far as budget versus outcome.
Yeah, and we've talked about this on the show before. I think I want to get maybe I might want to get someone on the show to sort of debate you on that because I think there's some folks that have differing opinions. I think it's less
I
about
think I know who
budget.
you're talking about.
Yeah, I think you do too. I need to ask him before I name him on the show, but I
Sure.
think he would want to come on the show. Um, but I think it's less about the budget, right? It's more about the stylistics, and it's
Yeah.
more about if people are consuming content on a platform like TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Instagram, and the majority of what they're seeing is a certain vibe, style, right? then the high production stuff is jarring and it pulls them out of it. And it immediately is recognized as different and not in a good way. It's distrusted because now it's a product or brand that's promoting. It goes from content to promotion, right? And so I think that's what it is. Um, versus I don't think it's a taste thing. I think it's a familiarity thing. Like because I don't think anyone would say, "Hey, I'd prefer to look at a shaky camera and low production quality." I don't think that's an aesthetic preference inherently. I think it's that we're trained to recognize patterns. Our brain works with a lot of heuristics. And the pattern that we've recognized is content on this channel looks and feels this way. So when it's different, then I should immediately break out of my heuristic, and therefore my trust um, algorithm kicks in, and I start to question things. So I think that's what it is. Because I would argue that people are still craving high quality production in entertainment, right? Especially on
Yeah.
like TV and stuff like that, right? So
But
I don't
that's
think it's
I would
a
say
taste
that's not
preference.
necessarily that's a different vehicle entirely, right?
Sure,
But there's still so many people putting their high production value content into the organic channels where people are expecting lower production value,
for
more
sure.
organic style content.
But I think this is more like your first point than you may realize, right? Because we talked about you got to know your audience and know the rules of the arena, right? And so I think that's it's the same problem, whether you're talking
Yeah.
about Reddit or you're talking about a short form video channel. People have expectations and rules and etiquette and grammar that you're supposed to adhere to. And if you don't, you're an outsider and you're going to be distrusted. So I do think there's a trend that I recognize and see and like, which is more and more you're like 15 seconds into a 30-second video before you even realize it's an ad, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's how they're getting you. Or, it's people sort of even all the way it just looks like an ad. Or I don't want to get into my next one because it's very related to this. But I think you're right. I don't think we have to focus so much on the polish, especially on certain channels. But I think it would be a risk to put a TV commercial out there that was low quality because we already have those from local businesses, local
Yeah.
car dealers and stuff like that. And
It
I don't
also may
think
be
you
a
build
risk
trust
to
that way.
continue to put a TV commercial out there at all.
Maybe. I don't know. We still get pretty good response from ads. I think. I mean, it's not as much linear TV as it used to be. It's a lot more CTV and streaming,
Yeah.
but you know. All right, so let me jump into my third because it's very related to this. So if you follow my progression, I think what I've realized is marketers are no longer in control of anything, right? We're not in control of the product value that is perceived by the consumer, right? Like, and so that we used to be with the P's, right? The four P's, we used to be product. We controlled that. We sort of controlled the narrative around the product and what the value proposition of the product is. We used to control who our audience was. We would define our audience, right? And in both those cases, the consumer now has all the control. They decide what the value in the product is and what they're going to choose. They decide um, who they are and what they like and how they're going to behave. And the third is it's the place that we're actually communicating. So the actual distribution side. And so I'm swinging away from it's sort of a yes and. I wouldn't say I'm swinging away from. For the first part of my career here, I was focused on owning the audience, first party data, controlling the distribution. Like I wanted complete control of where my message was being pushed out. Like everything was being pushed onto my social channels. I wanted to build the database, yada yada yada. What I think is increasingly apparent to me is even though for the first 3 or 4 years that I was here, I talked about don't build your house on rented land, don't use the gatekeepers because it's just a drug you can't get off. But I'm swinging back the other way a little bit because I've seen a lot of success in brand collaborations, in working with people that already have audiences. What you talked about with Reddit is the exact same thing that I'm saying, which is if there's already a conversation happening that you have relevance to, you should absolutely be there and you shouldn't worry about owning it. You shouldn't worry about whether it has long-term value to you if you can get short-term relevance and significance there. And so, the example I'm going to use, this is a brand you're probably really familiar with because you got daughters, but Elf, the makeup
Yeah.
company, you familiar with them?
Yeah.
So I think was it originally it was like eyes, lips, and face or something is what it is. So ELF, right? It's not Elf. I shouldn't say it is Elf. It's ELF. Um, but they really spend very little money on their own channels. They don't do ads in a traditional sense. Almost all of their growth, and they're like a $1.6 billion cosmetic brand now, and they've just made some massive acquisitions. All of it was built by working with content creators, like all of it. And so they'd go partner with people that were talking about makeup, and they'd say, "Hey, here's our products. We'll pay you to talk about our products." And that's been phenomenal. And they're not the only ones that do it, right? But they've been really successful. And if you look at how much growth there has been in advertising over the last 3 or 4 years, the vast majority of growth has been investments into content creator marketing. And not us creating content, but us partnering with content creators and increasingly other brands. So I think you're going to see this massive trend of brand collaborations, massive trends of content creator collaborations. And so this is sort of the third piece of my narrative, which is we lost control of the value of our product, we lost control of the audience, and we've lost control of the channels. We don't own or control any of that anymore. The audience does. And so the switch that we all have to make as destinations is we've got to know who our customer is. We've got to have conversations with our customers, and we've got to go work with them to help them make decisions. We've got to stop promoting, and we've got to start working collaboratively with our audience. Like that's the shift we're all going to make.
What does working collaboratively with your audience look like?
Well, it's not doing the self value driven promotion. Like we don't we flip the question at the beginning. So the question used to be, what do we want and how do we achieve it? Right? I want more occupancy in this month. Like I want to drive traffic to this business. We got to stop selling and start helping. And we got to start having dialogue with what are the consumers craving and how do we create those experiences and drive people to those experiences? How do we drive conversations about those experiences? So we're a part of a conversation and a collaboration with our audiences. We're no longer talking through a megaphone at these people. We're literally sitting down and having a conversation with them.
Yeah, it's
That's the
so
difference.
funny because what you're basically saying is we've got to go back to customer first decision making. And
Hmm.
how did we lose that? How did we get away from that? Right. And yet I think we most definitely did.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I still stand by what we talked about in the last couple of episodes, which is an organization exists to serve our community, right, and our stakeholders in our community. But we do that by marketing the community to an audience of customers. We have to make decisions that are in the interest of the customers, not necessarily in the interest of our businesses, although it is in the long term. But sometimes they might not realize it. I'll tell you one quick anecdote about this, which is sort of an analogy. So when I was um, on the market, I was on the dark side as an agency. We had a lot of hotel customers, right? And one of them that was actually in Myrtle Beach, we were doing a new website design. And back, this is like early 2000s. When you do a website design in the early 2000s, it's very feely, right? It's you show some aesthetics and that's where you start and people would pick the design they liked. And so usually you'd show 3 or 4 designs and you'd sort of have a favorite and you try to push them in this way. And usually you'd sort of have stark contrast. So this one hotel particularly, we had sort of a design that was very similar to their existing website. We had a design that we actually really focused on what the consumer would want, their existing customer was and what they would want. And then we did one that we knew would probably appeal more to the owners of the business, hoteliers. It was a little more elegant, darker background, thinner fonts, things like that. But we really were convinced, hey, this one that's more like fun and vibrant and less professional, but more exciting was the one to go because this is your audience. But the owner of the hotel was like, no, absolutely, I like this one is this is the one I would choose. And so we had this raging debate with the hotelier and trying to convince them that he wasn't their customer. He was a multi-millionaire owner of
Yeah.
multiple hotels. Like he was not the person staying at his three-star hotel, right? He wasn't the customer. And we're like, just because this is your preference doesn't mean it's going to work from a
It's
business
the
perspective.
classic example of marketing to yourself, right?
Right. And so what we convinced him to do, and it was probably mid 2000s because Facebook was already out and just beginning to take off, but we never really used it in this way before. We said, hey, can we do a thing? Can we post images of these two to your Facebook page and ask your audience? And can we also email it to your database and ask them and make it a fun thing? Say, hey, if you give us feedback, you can enter to win a chance to come to a trip, right? Because we knew if you're coming back to Myrtle Beach year after year, you probably are invested in the product. And it was overwhelming. It's like 97% of people wanted the one that was more akin to them, right? And so he was like, hands up, like, you're right. We're going to go with the one that the consumers want. But what was really interesting is not only did the website perform better, but the folks we'd engaged in that process, because we could track it on through the email database, ended up visiting more often than the ones we don't. I don't know if that was
Yeah.
causation or correlation, right? It could have been because they were going to come more often, they're more likely to respond. But it was a kind of neat little data point that we saw, which is, hey, we engage these people. There's a tighter tether with these people than the folks that we didn't engage with. And I think that's what I'm trying to get to. I think we need to engage our consumers en masse at an individual level as much as we can.
And be okay decentralizing where the message comes from
Yeah, it
as
doesn't
long as
matter.
the message gets out there.
Yeah, and one of the things that, and I am going to talk about, I promised I wouldn't talk about AI, but I'm going to talk about AI. One of the things that I really value in AI is it allows us to take a lot of disparate information, especially written information that is not organized and is not normalized in structured data, and bring it down, boil it down into something coherent. So now today we can have thousands of channels with thousands of conversations and still glean really good insight from it because we can take the big data and make it small through AI.
I like it.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
Well,
Fun episode.
feel like for an episode we threw together in 30 minutes, that wasn't a bad conversation.
You can't show behind the curtain like that, Stuart. You got to let them think we prepared for weeks.
I don't think we'd be kidding anyone if we pretended that that was the case. I mean, to be fair, we've been preparing our whole lives for this episode, right? Because all the knowledge we've acquired, the countless hours. It's kind of like Henry Ford when he goes to the factory and charges $10,000 to fix the problem, but it took him 2 seconds because he knew which nail to hit or whatever it is,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
So I might be mixing up stories there, but you get the point.
I get it.
Adam, if you want people to find you, they have comments on this show. If they want to volunteer to come on and poke fun at you in a future episode, where can they do that?
Well, and I want to invite the Desties that are listening. We want your voice. We would love to have you on as a guest. I don't care if you don't feel like you have a hot enough take or you're qualified or what. Come on the show. We'd love to have you on the show. If you're listening, and I know you come up to me at DI, you come up to me at events and tell me that you're listening to the show. Come on. We'd love to have you as a guest. And you can reach me for that, Adam at thebrandrevolt.com. You can find me on LinkedIn or, of course, on Tourism IQ.
And yeah, it's funny because some of my favorite conversations have been those folks that have been a little more timid, right? The ones that have been a little more reluctant and said, I don't really have a strong opinion, or I don't really feel like it's a well thought out thing. Like sometimes just coming on here and having a conversation will help you think, get through what that block is or what you're trying to process. So we'd love to have anyone on. You don't have to be super funny like me or super smart like me, or I don't know. What are you, Adam? What part do you play on this show? I
Oh, I
forget.
just think you got the names confused.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
You can just be just like Adam instead if you want. That'll work too. So, but we'd love to have you on the show. The more voices we have, the more this industry can move forward and tackle the challenges that we're all facing together. Because it's the greatest industry in the world. I really believe that. Thank you for listening. Please leave a review if you want to find me, Stuart.Butler at visitmonobeach.com. Until next time, this has been Destination Discourse.
Thanks, everybody.